Thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, to all the exiles whom I have sent into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon, build houses and live in them, plant gardens and eat their produce, take wives and have sons and daughters, take wives for your sons and give your daughters in marriage, that they may bear sons and daughters. Multiply there and do not decrease, but seek the welfare of the city where I have sent you into exile, and pray to the Lord on its behalf, for in its welfare you will find your welfare. Welcome back to Christ Capital, the show that wants to encourage you to love God, love neighbor, and build something. I'm the host, Dustin Johnson, and today's episode is going to be fantastic. If you hear a little bit of thundering in the background, it's my really beastly, manly voice. That's what it is. Just kidding. It's storming here, so if that messes anything up, this is the first time I think I've recorded while it's storming. So just be prepared. Before we get started with the episode, go like and subscribe to the podcast. Click the notification bells, get involved. We've got some t-shirts on the website. One of them I was looking at the other night is anti-democratic fascism, which I think is a really cool shirt and relevant for these days. So go check that out. There's some other really cool ones on there. But today I have a really awesome guest. His name is Kris Estep. I threw the Knievel in there because Kris, I saw you riding a go-kart on a wall, like a 90-degree wall.
Yeah, so that's the wall of death, which is an old carnival show is really what it is. They've been around since the early 1900s. And so it's basically the easiest way to explain it to somebody is, it's a building that the one that I ride on is the American Motordrome. And it's the largest one that still travels in the United States. There's only 4 of them left in the US. And so it's 30 feet across, and then the wall is 15 feet high. So, for those people who are listening, if you can imagine standing on top of a coffee can, a building that size and looking down in it. And then the guys in there ride go-karts and motorcycles on the side of that vertical board wall. So,
yeah, it was amazing. I'm sitting there like, you're like, hey, here's a video of me riding a go-kart on the wall. I'm like, okay, sure, whatever. Sure enough. Now, before I kind of prod more questions that way, can you just give the audience a brief overview, just introduction of who you are and just a kind of a brief synopsis of the many different things that you do that I kind of reached out to you to talk about?
Yeah, sure. So, kind of, I guess, the 3 main things, well, let's say 4. So I pastor a church here close by, Barberville Baptist Church. I've been there almost 11 years as the senior and teaching pastor. And then I do voiceover work on the side. It's something I've been into for probably almost about the same period of time, about 10 years, maybe a little longer than that. And then I work full time. My 9-to-5 job is at a motorcycle museum called Wheels Through Time, which is in Maggie Valley, North Carolina. And then I'm a husband and a father. And so between the 4 of those things, it keeps me rather busy. You
have a full plate. You sure do. Yeah. So Maggie Valley, I'm actually in Charlotte.
Okay.
So we're pretty close. I frequent Jefferson and the Boone area pretty often. So I know that's kind of out of the way, but it's still in that same neck of the woods, sort of.
Oh yeah. Well, next time you're up this way, you'll have to come check the museum out. It's a I'm sure we'll talk about it more in the podcast, but it's a pretty unique place.
Yes. Is the wall of death part of the museum? Does that have anything to do with that?
No, so it's still a traveling show like it was in the early 1900s, and so they come usually once a year. Usually it's either Memorial Day weekend or 4th of July weekend. And so then they, they'll be there for a couple of weeks, and then they pack up and move on to the next town, whoever's booked them, to come do the show there. Gotcha.
I thought that it had something to do with the museum. Maybe people ride motorcycles on the wall or something like that. But anyways, okay. So the museum, what's it all about? Did you start it, or
so the museum was started by a gentleman by the name of Dale Wachsler. And Dale was he got into motorcycling when he was a kid, about 15 years old, built his first Harley, taught himself how to work on it, and built this bike, and really kind of started everything that the museum is today. He opened a Harley dealership at 22. So talking about going out and doing something, he's a really good place to start, because this was a guy who was, when he got passionate about something, he carried it, really, I think, to the fullest that anybody could. So I think he still holds the record of the youngest Harley dealer in the United States, because like I said, he was 22 years old when he opened this dealership. And so through the years, started collecting motorcycles, and his original dealership was in Mount Vernon, Illinois. And so he had, as he collected all this stuff, he had it out behind his Harley dealership in a building, and you could walk through. Now, it wasn't set up so much as it is currently today. And so he had that there. People would come, and he got very well known for collecting old motorcycles, vintage motorcycles, classic cars, and things like that. When he sold the dealership in '99, he did so to move to the mountains of North Carolina to open a world-class antique and vintage motorcycle museum. So this is our 19th year there. The building's about almost 40,000 square feet, about 350 motorcycles in there. And so there's one other larger motorcycle museum, which is the Barber Museum in Alabama, but they do all kinds of motorcycles. So they do American, English, Japanese, German, and everything. We're solely focused on the history of the American motorcycle. And so we have, the oldest bike we have is a 1903 Indian. It's actually the oldest running Indian motorcycle in the world.
Wow.
We have the world's rarest motorcycle. If you Google world's rarest motorcycle, it's a motorcycle called the 1916 Traub. We have that there in our museum. And kind of our homage of what really makes us well known is not just the rarity of a lot of the bikes there, but also the fact that everything in the museum is an operating example. So you go to a lot of automotive or motorcycle museums and everything's static, so they've drained them of all the fluids, drained them of all the gas and oil, and they just sit there. Everything in our museum, we can put gas in it and fire it up and run. And that's part of what we do all day long. So as people come in, we're firing up bikes, riding bikes, doing all this stuff and showing people and demonstrating not just the beauty and the craftsmanship of these machines, but how they run and what they sound like.
That's awesome. 1903, and you got it, and it's still running.
Oh yeah.
Wow. That's awesome. That's awesome. My grandfather, he got a hold of some Model Ts. I think the oldest one he has is 1913. Mm-hmm. And just keeping that thing going is, I mean, if you can get it running, it just depends on the day and how you hold your tongue and all that stuff. Well, and so 1903, that's pretty crazy.
And that's one of the interesting things about, antique vehicles is that, nowadays we're used to, kind of our mindset, when you buy a car or motorcycle, you just get in every day and you start it and you drive it. At this point in time in our country, whether it was a motorcycle, whether it was a car, you knew there was a certain amount of not just regular maintenance, but daily maintenance that you had to do in order to keep that machine running. And so that's part of what we, try to teach people. And Dale, our founder, unfortunately, he passed away this past February after about a 4-year battle with cancer. But his son and his wife are continuing the museum. But part of Dale's vision always was to pass on to continuing generations this love for American ingenuity and craftsmanship and design. And it's really cool. We have just a wide range of ages of people who come through there. And it's really neat to see the very old and also the very young kind of walk in and see what's there and take a piece of that home with them, hopefully to inspire them to, to continue on in that line.
That's awesome. Yeah. We need to pick back up the mindset of fix it rather than you buy
then replace it. Yeah.
I
mean, and that's, we talk about that a lot because that's, even, I'm 37, but I can remember when I was a kid in the town where I lived, there was a television repair shop and a shoe repair shop and a vacuum cleaner repair shop and a, appliance repair shop, because even still at that point in time, things were built to be repaired and to last a long time. But we've, just in 20 years moved to this culture where everything is throwaway. So if your refrigerator tears up, most of the time you just buy a new one. If your television goes out, you just buy a new one. But yeah, it's like recreating in people this idea of building something that's made to last, and what the testimony that is of just what craftsmanship is. It's not just something to throw away, but it's something to last forever. And, a lot of these motorcycles, as long as you do what needs to be done, these things will literally run forever. I mean, because of the mechanics and the design, they're just made to always operate. You know, I've seen bikes. Let's see, about I guess 3 or 4 years ago, we had a 1919 Harley that came into the museum. It was parked in 1929. So they'd reused it for about 10 years. It got stuck in a barn somewhere, probably because they bought an automobile so they could carry their whole family, and the bike just got forgotten about. You know, so the bike had been sitting there for almost 90 years. And with a little bit of work one afternoon, myself and Dale and Dale's son Matt, who's currently managing the day-to-day at the museum, we spent probably 5 or 6 hours with this machine, checking the spark, checking the compression, making sure it got adequate fuel delivery. And the bike started up in 5 kicks, and the first time in almost 90 years. I mean, it's just, it's
That's
incredible.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, man, I wish I was as handy as that. But yeah, I definitely appreciate those who can do that type of stuff, that can, especially with automobiles. Mm-hmm. That's a skill that is just so valuable, in my opinion. But let's move over to the PR stuff. So speaking of motorcycles being in the public eye recently, Sturgis was in the news. This has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but man, our media organizations are, man, you know what? Never mind. I'm not going to go off on a sideshow.
Well, what I find interesting, is like they focus on events that have to do with typically more conservative audience. Now, there is, inside the motorcycle world, you have really both sides. I mean, there's a side that would be more conservative and a side that would slant more liberal, especially in the last probably 10 to 15 years. There's a lot of younger riders that have gotten involved that would probably politically slant more towards the left. Yeah. But what's interesting, like with the whole Sturgis thing and it all being all over the news, is, they had Lollapalooza, last week or a couple of weeks ago.
Exactly.
And there was nothing about that.
And Obama's birthday party or whatever.
So it's always incredible how they can always find the more conservative group in the or event to pinpoint and to pick on.
Yeah. So what do you do? Speaking of PR, what do you do for the museum, and how do you? I guess just let's start out with that. What do you do?
So it's interesting. So we, for a museum of our size, like I said, 40,000 square feet, about 350 machines that we maintain. We actually have a pretty small crew of people that work there. And so I wear, and really all of us, we wear a lot of hats in what we do. So I'm on a day-to-day basis when the museum's open. I'm on the floor every day as a docent, walking around, talking to people, answering questions, about the motorcycles, firing stuff up. I'm lucky to be able to help Matt actually work on the bikes back in the shop, when we're doing restorations and things like that. But the museum itself is a not-for-profit. So I handle a lot of our, public interaction, as far as our nonprofit status, handling, legal paperwork and things like that. And then I also write the bulk of do copywriting for the bulk of the stuff that goes out. So we send out emails to our supporters and different things like that. We do advertising on Facebook and things like that as well. And then writing press releases and any of those types of things where it's a contact with the general public, I usually, handle all of that.
Okay. How do you decide where the best place to put your ad dollars is? I know this is maybe getting a little technical, but sure. for an audience, what you would typically expect for motorcycle enthusiasts, mm-hmm. Maybe Instagram is not the best place, or maybe it is. Maybe Facebook is a good place, or maybe direct email. How do you think about that?
We probably spend the bulk of our time between direct email and on Facebook. We have a pretty active Instagram account. And so we have, but that's mostly, as far as that goes, is mostly just, continuing to have our name out there and continuing to bring people in. The museum being a not-for-profit, we depend solely on outside support. We don't have, somebody that, wealthy people that are actually, funding the museum. All of our support comes through, we have a donorship program. That there's a certain group of people that donate. It's $1,000 for a one-time gift, and they become one of our museum donors. And we have a wall where we recognize those folks. Through the door ticket sales to the museum. But our biggest fundraiser every year is each year we actually restore a classic motorcycle and then raffle tickets off for that. So like this year we
Okay.
have a 1948 Panhead. And so we sell tickets, all year long. And that's pretty much a lot of what our emails and Facebook stuff is concerning is, getting that news out there, and people buy tickets, and that helps support the museum.
Yeah. I wonder if you could like uh, advertise at Sturgis. Motorcyclers are
Oh, sure. So, I
travelers,
mean,
right?
we don't have any direct stuff there. We have a little bit of stuff, and in relation to that, and part of the reason why I think Facebook has been, one of our best resources is because, seemingly with the age demographic is on Facebook, you have, you have young people on Facebook, but I think overwhelmingly it's mostly
Yeah.
an older demographic on Facebook. The younger generation is on, some of the other platforms. And because of that, targeting those people that are interested in, either just motorcycles in general or specifically, Harley and American made motorcycles.
Yeah. Do you see a shift of like preferences towards the like newer bikes, like the street bikes and that kind of stuff? Like, I mean, I know the motorcycle world is way bigger than just what you guys are focusing on, but how do you like think about, reaching maybe that audience, or is there, any desire to reach that kind of audience?
Yeah, there's, I think if you look at both what, as far as American manufacturers anymore, I mean, you pretty much just have Harley and Indian. I mean, there's a few smaller companies, but those are your two biggest ones that are producing
Yeah.
an American made motorcycle. And I think if you look at the bikes that they're now putting out, you kind of see they're trending towards more this, classic style and idea, especially Indian, and
I can see
Harley. And
that.
in the past few years have come out with, these retro kind of paint schemes and things like that to pay homage
Yeah.
to the bikes in the past. And that's because there's an ever growing younger demographic of riders who are interested in these older machines.
Yeah.
So it was, the kind of the time span of Harleys, you start out with what they call the J model and then went to the flathead. And probably the two of the most popular antique Harley models you'll hear about is the knucklehead and the panhead. And those bikes have almost, for the average person, almost become, have almost kind of priced out of what the average person can get into.
Yeah.
And so probably in the last, 5 or 6 years, it's moved into the next generation, which was the shovelhead, which was the bike that came out, throughout the 70s and then, changing that. So you see a lot of younger guys and girls too. And I don't mean to just pigeonhole that there, but you see a lot of younger riders that are interested in these older machines.
Mm-hmm.
The issue that we have, I think, is anybody that is involved with doing anything on social media is you kind of figure out how to target your audience, and then Facebook and Instagram change the algorithm, and then you have to learn
Right.
everything over again.
Right.
So in the little over 5 years that I've been at the museum, myself and there's another guy that works there, Steve, and he's kind of our main social media guy. Like he's the one that actually, is figuring out the demographic stuff for all the ads and for all of that targeting stuff. And he and I will sit in his office all the time. He's like, okay, we had this figured out. Now they've changed everything. Now we have to
Right.
start all over again and figure this out.
If they can't be consistent, they're gonna start losing their ad dollars if people catch on to this and realize that it's not sustainable like that.
Yeah, I mean, it really doesn't make sense. And when you've got people that want to spend money, with you, as a company, to
Yeah.
target, it's like, why would you make that more difficult? It's like you'd think
Right.
you're going to make this as easy as you can to see a return on your dollar. But
Yeah. Yeah. We've had quite a few discussions about social media and algorithms and stuff like that. But anyways, you must be doing a really good job, because I saw a picture of you with Jason Momoa at the museum.
That's
Aquaman,
right.
Aquaman himself.
Yep.
And doesn't he? I don't know if I just watched the movie actually a couple of weeks ago, but does he ride a motorcycle
Yes.
in that movie?
Well, I'm not sure. To be honest, I don't know that I've actually seen any of his movies.
Okay.
I don't watch a whole, like, if I'm going to sit down in the evening, my wife and I, if we sit down, we usually watch YouTube, stuff on
Yeah.
YouTube. And
Yeah.
I don't watch a whole lot of movies, but he's really into vintage motorcycles.
Okay.
He got into those, a few years back. And so, Matt, there at the museum, he's been, working alongside of his dad for years and years. And Matt has become really well known in the antique motorcycle world for, building really great race bikes.
Mhm.
He kind of focused on an early era of Harley called the JD, which is what they used in the early 20s in board track racing and flat track racing. And man, he can build some just incredible bikes. And so Jason had heard about the museum and came down last year, probably, or actually around this time last year, and spent a few days there. And they did some filming. He's working on a video. I don't know if it's going to be a documentary or a TV series or something like that, but he came and did some filming there at the museum.
Oh, that's cool.
And so it was really neat. I mean, super nice guy, he's incredibly, like, you see how tall he is in pictures. He's even taller in person than he looks in pictures. I mean, it's
he looks massive.
yeah, and it was interesting because I've never been around somebody who, is that well known as far as his fame is concerned.
Yeah.
And we all went out riding one afternoon, and we left the museum and pulled out and had to stop at a gas station down the street, and then later on stopped to eat somewhere. And literally within 10 seconds of him, taking off his helmet to where people could recognize who it was just these swarms of people. It's like, I can't even imagine, when we're not a huge town. I mean, we're a pretty small place. I mean, so just the fact that happens there, I can't even imagine what it would be like to try to live life when you're instantly recognizable wherever you go and people just want to swarm around you.
I know. I was thinking about that. I was like, some people just crave for the fame, and then the minute they get it, they're like, "Oh no, what have I done?"
Yeah.
but yeah, it's cool. I mean, obviously, I think you're doing a really good job. The Instagram account looks awesome. Everyone go check it out. Talking about the younger generation getting involved with these older bikes, like a lot of these, Marvel characters ride these older bikes, like Wolverine, and there's a nice one in the Star Trek movies. But yeah, it's just you see kind of the shift back from the Fast and the Furious kind of like style to more more of the classic style. But so let's do a little shift. I want to talk about your other ventures. Well, specifically your voiceover acting or voice acting.
Yeah.
So how did you get involved in that? It seems like there's probably not a direct connection, but how did you kind of get involved?
Yeah, it's interesting. So as a kid, I was always really into the idea of radio and the spoken voice. So when I was younger, my dad worked a lot out of town, and so in the summertime I would travel with him when I was out of school, and we would always, kind of always the thing, we were on a trip, we'd stop at Cracker Barrel and eat breakfast in the morning. And in Cracker Barrel, this shows my age a little bit, they used to have this rack of cassette tapes that were these old radio shows from the 30s and 40s. And so we'd always, every time we ate at Cracker Barrel, we'd buy one of these cassette tapes and listen to that on our trip. And I was just always intrigued, by these, just hearing, what they used to call it, like the theater of the mind. So before television, you just sat around your radio, the family did, and you listened to these, dramas. They were mystery, and some that were comedy, and some that were suspense, and to listen to all these. And so I was always really intrigued by that. But for some reason, as I grew up, went through a high school, never really correlated the idea that was something that I could, pursue as a career. And so it wasn't until a number of years after I was, out of school and had gotten married, at the church that I was attending at the time, there was a guy there who had spent most of his life as a radio DJ, had gotten out of being a DJ and just did voiceover work. And so started hanging around him and, finding out, what he did, and just was really intrigued by this idea. So he kind of helped me get started in, getting my first, microphone and all that kind of stuff set up, and, getting me some contacts to start doing a little bit of work here and there. And it's just kind of grown from there. And, unfortunately, the voiceover world is a lot like stage acting or television or movie acting. You have to spend about 90 or 95% of your time trying to sell yourself, and about 5% of your time actually acting. And,
right.
And, over the past couple of years, it's been really hard because as the price of technology has come down, a lot more people have tried to get into the voiceover world. And then last year, because you had all these people kind of sitting at home, you had more people so the market is really pretty heavily saturated with people out there trying to do work. So for me, it's more of just, it's not a, it's not a full-time job for me. It's just something I do as opportunities come available. And it's just extra money for, for the family. We a lot of times put it back and use it for vacations and, it's other things that pop up, but I love doing it. I would love to do more of it, but it's just a really hard market.
Yeah. And just for the audience, because I don't think they might not be aware, you've done stuff for Charlotte Area Transit, CAT system. You've done stuff for Wheels in Time. You've done stuff for, there are other ones. You've done a TV show or a cartoon.
Yeah. So just recently, and that's
got to be different than.
Yeah, it was actually the first animated series that I've done. And so it's an Italian cartoon called Mini Pet Pals. And it's one of those shows that for an adult, you look at it and you're like, oh my gosh, this is just mind numbing. But I showed it to my kids and, I was figuring them to be like, but they loved it. They thought it was great. And it's a fun show. It's really nice because it's a show that's, it's clean. There's no like overt, like, political, try to put an agenda. It's just a bunch of these tiny little animals, learning things about being nice and not being a bully and learning about nature and all those kinds of things. And so what I was doing was dubbing English voices over top of the original cartoon that was originally in Italian. So it was a pretty interesting, learning experience for me because I'd never done dubbing before. So basically it's very similar to how we're, on this Zoom call right now. I was on there with the director, and you have a screen where I can see him. And then the second screen, I can see the original cartoon. And then it's really similar if you've ever done like karaoke. There's just a little blurb at the top and he plays the scene first so I can get an idea of what's happening and the kind of the background. And then when he hits record, there's just an English text block and you have to fit it in. That's the thing you have to learn is you have to fit it in a certain time frame in order to match the, what they call the lip flap of the character.
Yeah, I've always wondered that. Like, do you have, like, how accurate do you have to be with the mouthing of the characters? Because that would be difficult. I mean, it seems like that would be hard to do.
Yeah, you don't hardly have to be accurate with like the actual movement of the mouth with each word, but they just want it to be that when the mouth opens, you start speaking and that you're done by the time the mouth stops moving, if that makes sense. Yeah. So then everything else just kind of fits in between. And sometimes it matches up fairly decently. And sometimes it's a little off, but with animation, it's a lot easier because, it's not an actual human mouth you're voicing to. It's basically, lines just opening and closing, so it's not as noticeable if the words are a little different.
Yeah. Plus, I'm sure they probably have some technology where they can program it to where it moves with your, like a lot of the social media cameras, like they'll move with your mouth and all that stuff.
Exactly.
Or if that's not something that's already being done, I'm sure it will be in the future. But yeah, I just think it's so cool that you're doing that. I mean, you just said, hey, look, I've got something that I'm interested in. I want to do. Let me just see if I can, put my mind to it, put my hand to the plow, so to speak, and just, try to develop something, make a little bit of money, provide value to someone. And what I thought was really interesting is that your kind of PR plays into this because you have to market yourself. Like you don't have to be or it doesn't seem like you have to be as versatile. Like you don't have to like have a good James Earl Jones voice.
Yeah, and
like
I think
for you.
That's incredibly true because I think that's where a lot of people have a misconception about, voice acting and voiceover because 10 to 15 years ago and before then, there was kind of this stereotypical, voiceover voice, where every time you watched a commercial or you heard a narration or on a video, it was, Don LaFontaine was the guy throughout, for us, the 80s and 90s. He was the trailer voice. Like he did almost every single movie trailer that was out there.
Yeah. Like
and he was the guy that, in a world where both of our, but now that's changed. One of the biggest ways it's changed is that most movie trailers nowadays don't have a narrator voice over top of it.
I've noticed that, yeah.
But in the times which they do, they're moving much more towards a conversational style read. I mean, that's what you hear almost every commercial. You don't have the announcer voice anymore, where it's that, very crisp and clear kind of, annotated, very announcery type stuff. They just want somebody who sounds like they're carrying on a conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and so people tend to think that, you know, voiceovers only specifically for those types of, you know, deep baritone voices, but really there's a market out there for any kind of voice. But the one thing that you do need to have the ability, it's not just reading lines off a page. You have to be able to make those lines mean something to somebody. So, you know, when you think about television acting or movie acting, the character or the actor is reciting the lines, but he also has the advantage of you being able to see his body language. You know, so if he's angry, you know, he can, you know, clench his face and make his face turn red or ball up his fist. Or if he's emotional, you know, he can make his face look sad. You don't have that in voice acting. So you have to convey those things with your voice. So it really is a necessity to have, most people say that you need to have acting classes. Not everybody does. But you need to have that ability to be able to convey those things through your voice. Because somebody can't see your face when all they're holy is just hearing your voice. And it's amazing how just changing the way that your face is shaped when you're speaking will convey those things. So like I've taken, I don't know how many, I've had a bunch of different voiceover coaches and classes and things like that. And sometimes it's even just as simple as smiling when you say something, because when you're smiling, it conveys that through your voice. And it's a lot of times even just in the way you hold your body. Dawes Butler was the man who did, he's a lot of people know who Mel Blanc is. Mel Blanc did almost every Looney Tunes character that was ever done back in the 60s and 70s and 80s. Dawes Butler was the same, but he was at Hanna-Barbera. So he did Yogi Bear and Huckleberry Hound and all these different things. And there's this incredibly cool video you can go watch on YouTube where he kind of gives a tour of his studio. And this was back probably sometime in the early 80s. And he talks about this idea. And he's this tiny little guy. I mean, he was a short little man, but he would hold his, when he was doing Yogi Bear, he would hold his chest out, and so like he was a bear, so he's talking about, he's like, you want to take on the shape or the persona of whatever thing that you're trying to convey, so if you want to do something big, you make yourself big. And if you're doing something small, you make yourself small. So it's kind of learning all those techniques. That's what makes somebody a very versatile voice actor. And as simple as it sounds to say that you want a conversational tone, one of the things that I struggled with probably the most for my own self was because I had listened so much to voice stuff growing up that was that more announcery tone. It was very hard for me that when I got in front of the microphone and I had the script in front of me to break away from that and to just do something that sounded like I was just carrying on a regular conversation with somebody.
Yeah.
So it's a lot more difficult than it sounds, but that's really, I would say probably 95% of all voiceover work today. When the script comes out, there's always instructions on what they're looking for. And it says, no announcers, conversational style read. I mean, you see it on just about every single script that comes through.
That's awesome. Yeah. And it's cool. Like what I was saying, you have to pitch yourself, your kind of tag for yourself is fun, cool, and with the Southern charm or something like that. So like us Southerners have this specific thing that other people can hear. That's right. That we don't necessarily hear. Like I work with a lot of people that are in Manhattan, and I noticed their things, like their accents, and I'm like, how do you guys not hear this? And they're like, I don't hear anything.
Well, and for myself, so I know I still have a lot of Southern slang in my vocabulary, but I've if you were to have been able to hear me say 15 years ago, I had a very, very thick Southern drawl. And so I worked on a lot of that, took some accent reduction classes and things like that, just to turn off a little bit of that. I mean, I can turn it back on if I want to, but just so that it would allow me to be a little more widespread in the things that I could audition for. Now, there's certain things that, when they ask for non-accent, I'm not going to send in an audition because to me, I don't hear it as much as say, neighbors down the street who have lived here all their lives and are extremely Southern, but I know that it's still there.
Yeah.
But that's the good thing about voiceover is that, whether you have a New York accent or a Southern accent or a West Coast accent, there's always work out there where they're looking for those particular voices. Now, it's not quite as much work as if you have a very neutral, plain speaking voice with no discernible accent. There's a lot more for that. But there is stuff out there, so there's always that kind of work to be available.
Yeah. like niching down and finding your niche and where
Yeah.
your product fits in the best.
Yeah.
I just think it's really cool. When you think of voice acting, people don't think of all the behind the scenes stuff, just all the intricacies and the details. But I don't say that to like discourage anyone that may be interested in that to like,
No.
pursue it. But I am saying like there's more to it than just that. And I'm sure you've had an awesome time on your journey of practicing and developing your skill and your product and all of that.
I would encourage, anybody that wants to do it. It's like the first thing to do is to not run out and just buy a microphone. The first thing to do is to find, a reputable voice acting coach and just take a couple of classes, because they're going to be able to, in just a few classes, be able to kind of pinpoint, whether you're going to be good at this or not, and whether, there's potential there, so I would encourage, there's a voice actor by the name of D. Bradley Baker, and he has a website that he created. I think it's So You Want to Be a Voice Actor, I think it's So You Want to Be a Voice Actor.com, something along those lines. And he has all these available resources and kind of talks about the ins and outs of the industry and the things that a lot of people don't think about, because a lot of times people hear, oh, I can just talk into a microphone and I can make a lot of money, and unfortunately, just like there is in any industry, there's Facebook, ads and stuff out there that kind of promise that to people. It's like, oh, voiceover, you can, within 3 months, if you pay me all this money, I'll give you all the inside scoops. And within 3 months, you could be making 6 figures a year. And it's just not true.
Yeah. Not all of us can be podcasters that make millions of dollars like Christ and Capital,
Yeah, that's right. We can't all do that. But it's voice acting. I mean, they're always, and especially if you have a really, unique thing about your voice, there's kinds of things out there.
Like James Earl Jones, the classic.
Yeah. And it's like, there's, for a lot of ladies, because their voices are, much higher, a lot of times when you see young male characters on cartoons, a lot of times those are voiced by women. Like the voice of Bart Simpson is voiced by a woman. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff out there, especially in the animation world, that you can do that. And that's, really, again, one of the cool things about voiceover is that, if I were going to be a screen actor, there's only a couple of roles that I could play, just based on the way that I look. But with voice acting, you can play any kind of character. You can play a guy that's 6 foot tall or a guy that's 4'3". I mean, you can kind of do the whole gamut because it's just your voice. And so learning to control that and learning to be able to use that is the key to, to successful voice acting.
Yeah, man. Well, that's awesome. I think it's just really a cool thing that you've taken something as mundane as a voice. Everyone has one, and you've monetized it. And I know you see the huge network of voiceover actors and all the skill that's out there, but normal people don't see that. And so when they're introduced and pulled into that world, it's like, wow, I could, maybe that's something I could do, or like, and so I think it's just really cool. But so since we're kind of closing this out, you do all this, you PR work for a museum, you're a pastor, you do voiceover acting, you're a mechanic of some sort.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So you do all these things. You're a doer, you're a go-getter, you're a creator. What's your advice to a Christian or just anyone in general who's, they have something in their mind that they've been thinking about, going out and doing or creating or something, but they just haven't kind of put the hand to the plow, like I said. What's your advice?
Well, just do it. That's the thing that I struggled with the most. And I've had this struggle in almost everything that I've really kind of dealt with. So whether that was voiceover work, even some of my stuff at the museum, is that fear of criticism, so, and I think I've heard Darren Dillon talk about this a number of times, is that, okay, you're going to post something on Instagram and you put it on there and you top it all out. And then you don't hit post because you're like, well, maybe it's not as good as it could be, maybe I could do this, or maybe, and so then you just don't do it. And so a lot of times it's just that effect of, listen, it's going to pop up on somebody's feed. And if they like it, they're going to like it. If they're not, they're going to scroll past it. And then tomorrow they're not even going to remember it, but for you, being able to start doing it is what makes you better. Because continuing to do something and getting better at it each time you do it is what makes you successful in that. And really, again, it's not about the number of Instagram followers you have. I mean, because there's people out there that have hundreds of thousands of followers, but who knows how many of those they've bought along the way. You know what I'm saying? It's
Right.
like,
Yeah.
so it's just about the idea of becoming a creative is not about something that you just all of a sudden wake up on one day and have. It's just putting in the work to do it. And so you just got to just every day practice at it. The old saying is, it takes 10,000 hours to become an expert at something. And if you don't start, you're never going to make it there.
Right.
So that would be my encouragement. It's like, whether you're into photography or voiceover or art or whatever it is, it's like, just start doing it and start putting it out there. For me, and I got this from Darren again, is that, be willing. And now this would fly in the face of what a lot of people in the voiceover world would tell you. They would hate me for saying this, but I believe it's true. Is that just put yourself out there and call somebody, listen, I'll do this for you for free. It's like, I just want to do this, and that has opened so many doors for me in different areas that have come back later with paying work, is just being willing to say, hey, I want to do this. I want to do it for free. You don't owe me anything, and just let me do this, and taking some steps that way, because you're really not losing anything. There a lot of people would say, well, you're giving yourself away, but yeah, it's like, but right now I'm not making anything with what I'm doing anyway. So why not do something that might have the potential to get me a few steps forward? But it's just learning to not be afraid of the naysayers. We have at the museum, we have a pretty large Instagram following. We had last year, because of the pandemic, the state of North Carolina wouldn't let the museums open up. And so we spent most of the summer making YouTube videos. We did like 70 or 80 YouTube videos where we focused each one on a particular motorcycle in the museum. And it did really well for us. I mean, we got a great, pretty large following on YouTube, and it still continued to, to pay benefits for us just in the people that have come through the door this year because they found us on YouTube last year.
Oh, wow.
And so, every video, you've got all these positive comments, man, this is great. This is great. This is great. And then you always have, this is the stupidest thing I've ever seen in my life. And it's like, there's always going to be those people.
Yeah.
And you just have to worry. It's like, who cares? It's like, if you're doing what you love, again, where you are today, 10 years from now, you'll be better if you keep doing it. And you just got to not worry about the naysayers and keep pushing forward.
I love it. I love it. Where can the audience get you? Where they get in touch with you?
Yeah. So pretty much on all social media, it's just Kris Estep VO. So KRIS ESTEP VO. So that's Facebook, Instagram, and all that stuff. So that's pretty much the easiest way to follow me. Instagram is probably where I'm the most active as far as posting stuff for the museum and for my voiceover. And then I would encourage people to check out the Instagram for the museum too. That's just Wheels Through Time, and you can check that out on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram.
I will vouch for that. Both of those Instagram accounts are awesome. In line with what we were just talking about, everyone, go out, kill your darlings. Don't be precious. Just go out and do it. Get started. Any last things you want to say?
No, I'd appreciate being on. Just encourage people. Like you said, just keep doing it. We need, as I'm watching the current culture and the things where I was like, we need more Christians producing quality content.
Yes, exactly.
Putting out incredible things, for the glory of God. And not that everything has to be specifically a gospel presentation, but just putting out good quality work. That's entertaining. God gave us these, God gave us the arts, and so we need to take those things and use them, for the kingdom.
Exactly. We need to be culture makers, culture builders. And part of that is building businesses.
That's right.
Providing value, exchanging, loving your neighbor. I think that's the way to end it. Love God, love neighbor, and build something. Talk to you guys later. Awesome. Let me pause this.